What you're about to see is an interview that I recently did with Rufus Edmisten. Many of you will remember Rufus from his runs for governor, for Secretary of State, for the time that he was also running for Attorney General, and while he was Attorney General. But one of the things that I know that I left out in the interview that I did want to include was Rufus was running for governor against Jim Martin, and Jim Martin won that year. And off camera, he did not know that there was a live mic, and he uttered the words, "If I have to eat another damnable piece of barbecue, I don't know what I'll do." And of course that spread like wildfire across North Carolina, and barbecue being one of the major staples, culinary staples of North Carolina, it made quite a ripple. So that's really one of the few things that I can say on the air that I would attribute to Rufus, that he was a character, he was lovable, and as a candidate, and as you'll see from this interview, still very relevant today, especially in the role that he played in Watergate. Well, I'm just happy to be here today with Rufus Edmisten, which if you're from North Carolina, you know exactly who that is and where he's been. But for those of you that have lived in a hole somewhere, Rufus was probably came into prominence during the Watergate hearings as he sat there on the dais behind Senator Sam. And for me, my favorite photo was always you with the pipe.
Right. You're not old enough to remember Watergate.
I watched every one of those hearings.
Well, it's digitized now, I understand, and I want to go back and look at some of them. Because here I was, 32 years old, in a double knit polyester leisure suit that we all wore back then. And Senator Irvin had a pale blue one. Fred Thompson had one of those brown ones. And of course, if we got anywhere near a flame, they would explode on you, catch on fire. And even bell bottoms. And one time I had a Nehru suit on.
Oh my gosh.
I've got to go back and find those.
Oh my God. Well, for those of you that the Fred Thompson he's discussing, you probably know from Law and Order as the New York City DA instead of the later senator from Tennessee. Did he take the place of
Senator Baker?
Senator Baker.
And Fred was the deputy chief counsel under Baker. I was his counterpart. I was the deputy chief counsel under Senator Irvin. And such a nice, wonderful person. He was always cordial, was the epitome of a Southern gentleman. Just a fantastic
Well, I'd
guy.
say that about you, too. So.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And Fred, too, was a movie star, if you recall, Hunt for Red October.
Yeah, I forgot that.
Yeah. Fred one time wanted to run for U.S. president and came down and I said, "Fred, I'll come out for you or against you, whichever you think will help you." And it never got off the ground.
Those were the good old days.
Yeah.
Well, I sit here and I think about what you guys faced with Nixon and what we're facing today, which, you know, is a total contrast. But what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the lead up to delivering that subpoena over to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Well, before Watergate, I'd been with Irvin a total of about 10 years, had gone to law school at nighttime, worked during the day, and traveled with Senator Irvin. And I always said I'd learned more from him than I did in 3 years of law school. And at age 27, he made me the chief counsel and staff director of the Senate Subcommittee on Separation of Powers. And little did we know, we were studying the same kind of things that would come up in Watergate. Executive privilege, not spending money. Things repeat themselves, Don. They do. They repeat themselves. And so when Watergate came along, we all thought it was just the News Observer, the Washington Post said, well, it was just a flicker on the back page of a little common break-in. And you know something? I knew something was wrong, because why were all those men dressed in suits and ties on? that's a strange burglary outfit. And then later it was discovered, of course, by Woodward and Bernstein, that I've been on many panels with, that they were the White House burglars trying to find something that would be useful in Nixon's 1972 campaign. And there was a North Carolinian involved in that. His name was Spencer. It was his office they primarily wanted to debug. And as you know, they left the tape there, and the night watchman saw the tape and sort of called the D.C. policeman, and then didn't do anything at that time, but they came back the next night. There was a double trial on that. People don't remember that. Yeah. And then all broke loose about a year later as Woodward and Bernstein continued their push to find out, follow the money, who's behind it. And then Senator Mike Mansfield, the majority leader at that time from Montana, said, we're going to form a committee to look into that, which later became the Watergate Committee. And he said, I've got to choose somebody who is as clean as the down feathers on a goose, who's knowledgeable, and who is not seeking to use it to run for president. Because when it was first announced, Senator Kennedy and a bunch of people that wanted to run for president said, we want to get on that thing. Yeah. And so Irvin was picked. Senator Baker of Tennessee was picked as the deputy co-chair. And here you had a Western North Carolina guy, an Eastern Tennessee guy, and it was like a team of horses in absolute harmony, the way they worked together. In fact, they inspired me so that my next book is going to be entitled, I Finally Got a Few Things Right, Bring Back Civility. Yeah. Yeah. They were examples of great civility. Yeah. Yeah. They never argued. They never, in any way, said derogatory things about one another in public. How I long for those days back again. And then we kept fighting more and more and more. And by the way, there was a good contingent of North Carolinians on the Watergate Committee that I brought them up, and I called them the Edmisten Mafia. Gene Boyce, and
oh my God,
you had Frank Harper from High Point. Yeah. You had a number of other people, and Gene is the one who discovered that there was a taping system in the White House. And boy, was that a big day. Oh my God, I'll never forget it. He came to me and said, well, there's a taping system in the White House. Now, I wasn't at that executive session. See, like all lawyers, you never put anybody on the stand unless you know what they're going to say, because you might get eaten alive. And I wasn't at that executive session. There was a man named Butterfield, and I was out at Senator Herman Talmadge's home in D.C. having a party. And Gene came up to me and said, well, we've discovered from Alexander Butterfield that there's a taping system in the White House. I said, where? He said, White House, the place up in Maryland, the retreat there, executive office building, everywhere Nixon goes. And it was dynamite for the committee. Yeah. Well, right after that, right before the discovery of the Watergate tapes, we had interviewed a man named John Dean. For those of us who are not old enough to remember Watergate, he was the president's counsel and was chosen by the president to sort of help cover things up. And John Dean testified, finally decided he'd had enough of it, came to our committee and offered his testimony. Went on for 2 days and a half, the most boring testimony I've ever witnessed anywhere, but he was meticulous. John, he never made any mistakes. He made one little mistake. He said that some dinner was at the Mayflower Cafe, and they jumped all over that at the White House. They said it was at the Mayflower restaurant at the hotel, and that was not material. So he had a photogenic memory, and then with the knowledge of the tapes, it was, how do you get them? Yeah. Well, here's a little Rufus story. We were in Irvin's office in executive session. Nobody, the public wasn't in there, only the committee members and Fred Thompson and myself. And Senator Irvin said, we need to get those tapes. And Herman Talmadge said, well, why don't we subpoena them? That had never been dreamed of in our American history before. You don't subpoena, at that time, you didn't subpoena a president. And everybody looked quizzical around and in bewilderment. And so Irvin said, well, wait a minute, let's do this. He said, Rufus, go get President Nixon on the telephone. Sort of like, go get a loaf of bread.
Yeah.
That casual. And I went into a little anteroom, and I knew the number to the White House, and I dialed it up, remember?
Oh, yes.
Dial telephone. And I got Miss Rosemary Wood, his President Nixon's secretary, and I said, Ms. Wood, this is Rufus Edmisten, Deputy Chief Counsel of the Senate Watergate Committee. Senator Ervin would like to speak to President Nixon. She said, well, hold on a minute, I'll see when he's available. I was expecting some couple of weeks away. And you got to remember, in the meantime, President Nixon had been saying that the Ervin Committee is out to get me, out to get me, out to get me. Well, I'm there holding the phone waiting on Rosemary Wood, and all of a sudden, this voice comes on. Senator Ervin, this is Richard Nixon. I was so dumbfounded, so taken off, it's a wonder I didn't wet my pants, that I blurted out, unknowingly, Mr. President, Senator Ervin wants to get you. I said, sir, I wants to get you on the phone. And I didn't tell the committee till after it was over, so I went back and told the senator that President Nixon was on the phone. And the conversation ensued between Ervin and the president. And Senator Ervin's eyebrows would get up and down like windshield wipers when he would get very excited. And of course, we could only hear one side of it. And it finally ended after about 10 minutes. And the senator said, well, Mr. President, I'm so sorry you won't voluntarily give up the tapes. And we'll just have to go from there. Well, Talmadge again said, well, we need to subpoena them. And lo and behold, the committee unanimously voted, unanimously, including the senator from Georgia, well, not Georgia, Florida. All the Republicans voted with the Democrats to subpoena the tapes. Now, you can't imagine something like that happening today.
No.
It never would. It's like a snowball on a day like this.
Yeah.
And then it was a unanimous vote. And since I was sort of on the COO of the committee, sort of kept the train running, I decided that, well, why don't I take the subpoena down there? So I chose myself to take the subpoena. And I'll never forget that hot summer day, July the 23rd, 1973. I got in the back of a police car, Capitol Hill police car, and later my mother said, well, I was glad that one time you were in the back of a police car for a good reason.
Yeah.
We went down Pennsylvania Avenue. It seemed like the whole world was following us, and also like almost like the Red Sea opening in the Bible. No traffic on the road because the D.C. Police Department had sort of helped us get down there and got to the executive office building where we had agreed to meet the president's counsel at the time. His name was Leonard Garment.
Oh, yeah.
And a professor was also one of his, Charles Allen Wright, whose law book I'd used in law school. And so I decided to make it a big deal, so I read the whole subpoena. It was about 2 pages. It had a list of the subpoenaed tapes we wanted and a list of the characters. And the little devilish personality in me came out. If people remember, Ervin used to carry around a little pocket-sized Constitution. Well, I had one in my back pocket. And as soon as I gave the subpoena to the president's counsel, I whipped that little baby out and said, well, it's been said that you folks could use one of these down here too. So not only did I deliver the first subpoena on the president in history of the country, I delivered a Constitution. And then we know what happened from then on out. And another point about the Watergate hearings, when they finally came to a crescendo and Nixon was, the tapes were revealed and he was heard saying things like, "How much will it cost to pay off the Cubans?" Things like that that are just horrendous. And the pressure was on Nixon by that time. There'd been a special prosecutor appointed, and a delegation of senators, Republican senators, John, from the Senate, Hugh Scott of Pennsylvania, Barry Goldwater, several other prominent senators.
They marched to the White House, didn't it?
Marched down to the White House and said, "Mr. President, you need to resign. If you don't, you'll be impeached. And then when it comes to the Senate for a trial for removal, we will vote for that." Well, 2 days later, there was the sign of the president leaving. And at least Nixon had enough was grounded in government enough to know when it was enough. I've often said this, that without his stupidity of surrounding himself with those sycophants that didn't tell him this is wrong, you can't do this, Mr. President, you can't pay off people. He would have survived the presidency if he had gone on TV and said, "Ladies and gentlemen of the country, my fellow citizens, I screwed up.
Sure.
I had some bad advice from staff I never should have taken. I'm sorry, I want you to forgive me." The American people are very forgiving.
Absolutely.
They respect someone who owns up. He was so concerned about his legacy that he wanted to keep those tapes and never thought for a moment that they would be released. And of course, as you recall, the Supreme Court got the case from us and the special prosecutor, and they ruled in favor of demanding the release of the tapes and said that executive privilege is no such thing. And it was 8-0, and one man recused himself, Justice Rehnquist, who had been appointed by Nixon. And so that's a nutshell of what happened, plus all the little things here and there that I'm now remembering. And I have some of them in this book. That's Rufus on the front there. That's Senator Irvin. That's me. And the Capitol. Still got a few of those left. You can get them from Amazon. And the proceeds go to something I've got called the Super Kids, which you know about.
Oh, absolutely.
And so
absolutely.
It good stories in there, not only about Watergate, but growing up in Boone and my years as
well, your
Attorney
years,
General.
I wanted to ask you too, because I remember this distinctly when Nixon had 2 Supreme Court appointments, and he was trying to reward the Southern strategy that he had put forth, and he had one from Florida, as I recollect, and another one from Tennessee. He was trying to find a Southerner to put in there.
Correct.
And neither one of those made it.
They didn't make it in the Senate. Irvin blocked both of them because he said they weren't qualified.
And come to find out, I think one of them was found in the restroom in Florida with a young boy or something.
I won't say his name, but he was a weird fellow.
Yeah,
most definitely. But
I remember so much being here and hearing Southerners talk. We're finally going to get a Southerner on the Supreme Court,
right?
And he just picked the wrong ones.
Totally. And I remember the hearings, and you have to have a hearing for the Senate Judiciary Committee, and then they've got to vote you out and get Senate approval. And these 2 guys never made it out of the Senate committee.
Wow.
And they sent people over there from the White House to try to argue for them. And Senator Irvin said, "No, they're just not qualified to be on the court." And that doesn't seem to work today.
No.
But I'm not going to get into that.
Well, let me switch gears, because I remember so well when you ran for governor, and I remember when we finally got you there as Secretary of State, and you had a loyal following. But after those Nixon coattails came through in '72, North Carolina had a different complexion.
Totally.
Nobody
from North Carolina had been elected to the U.S. Senate. Senator Helms came in 1972, I remember it well, and when I was still in Washington, Helms was there. I'm going to use him in my book, too, about civility, because in his personal side, he was a very civil guy.
Yeah.
Was always voted by the Senate Staff Club in a survey to be one of the most courteous, which was
Genteel.
totally different from his
Yeah.
public persona. And then another thing, too, John, about the whole Watergate affair. You look back on it, it was 1972. All this Watergate hearing stuff came after Nixon had been elected by a landslide. And maybe you can correct me. Did McGovern take any state?
McGovern won Massachusetts and District of
And
Columbia.
District of Columbia.
Yeah.
Well, I've often said McGovern was a decent, good man, but a church mouse could have beaten him. And all that stuff they did stemmed from the fact that Richard Nixon vowed to himself and others, I'll never have a close election again, because he was running against Hubert Humphrey and barely made it.
Yeah.
So all this overkill, all this stupidity, dirty tricks, and that business about breaking in on the Democratic headquarters.
Yeah.
I ran 11 times statewide, and I never had a thing in my office that was as beneficial as that pencil I'm holding right now. You didn't have things like that. I don't know what they thought they were looking for. Secrets, and to this day, nobody really knows what they thought was there, because any game plan would be pure politics.
Or up here.
Yes, somehow. And it's just myth about, in the headquarters you've got all these lists of things. Well, they're all at the state voting headquarters. They're at the Board of Elections.
Yep.
So that mystifies me too, why there was such a cavalcade of stupidity. And another thing too, John, that I have often said, Nixon surrounded himself with people who had never been involved in as much as going to a city council meeting.
Right.
They were Wall Street admin like Haldeman, Ehrlichman, all those dummies.
Yep.
And they got
He
the man.
paid for it though.
Yeah, he paid for it. And I truly do believe that again, that if Nixon had survived, he would have been one of the upper echelon presidents, opening up China,
Yeah.
the EPA,
Yep.
and most people don't know it, which is a culture of trigger point today. He started the quota system. I remember Irvin jumping on him about it way before Watergate, where there was a project in Philadelphia, a federal project, and Nixon decreed that there would be a certain percentage of minorities on it. And I'm sure a lot of folks would not want to know that Nixon
Well, the EPA.
started affirmative action.
Yeah.
Yeah, EPA.
I mean, when the EPA was a Nixon project,
Yeah.
and you know what I think too about '72 and how long his coattails were. Jim Holzhauser became a good friend of mine later in life because of his daughter and I were at Wake Forest together, and then Carl Stewart used to always say, "Well, you know, he'd be a Democrat today if he were running."
True.
And I think about it. As a Republican, he proposed public kindergarten.
Absolutely.
They would run him out of the party today.
Well, Jim Holzhauser was from Boone, my hometown. He went to school with two of my brothers and my sister. And I was in public office when he was, and there was a camaraderie,
Yep.
a very close decency. I would propose something, he'd say, "No, I won't do that." And then if I had something where I gave a ruling, I said, "No, Governor, I can't do that." There are no hard feelings.
Yeah.
And I tell you another person, too, that I'm going to interview for my second book, the one on civility, is Governor Jim Martin.
Yes.
We've had several conversations, and he's very bewildered about the state of
Yes,
politics today. Very bewildered. And I can't wait to talk to him for a couple hours. Well, I'm going to drive to Charlotte.
Well, let me tell you, I've been to his house at Lake Norman and sat there with him and visited. And you are right. He is he puts North Carolina first, and he's very upset about the way things are going.
Yeah.
But the thing Jim Martin, when he ran on good roads, good schools, good jobs.
absolutely.
And those were his three
Yeah.
things. Can you imagine today
Yeah.
seeing a Republican do that?
You were talking about headwinds. Of course, '84 was a disastrous year for Democrats in North Carolina because Ronald Reagan took the
Right.
state by way over
Yep.
56%, carried me out, carried Governor Jim Hunt out,
Yep.
bless his heart.
Yep.
Tides sometimes in politics are uncontrollable. It's like some of those waves that people ride all the time out in the ocean. You can't control them.
Well, tell me the last time you spoke with Senator Irving before he died, and what that looked like after you had left working with him.
Well, I would go by Morganton as much as I could, and he said it's good to not have to wear a coat and tie every day. As he sat there in his study, as you know, he appeared in some ads.
Yeah.
One of them was the credit card.
Yep.
And you read and read and read. Never went on the lecture trail. He was offered huge sums of money to go on the lecture
Yep.
tour, and he didn't do it. And he still adored his Miss Margaret. That was his wife. And all those years, this is nothing that... It sort of reminds me of The Help, the movie that I've seen 3 times. The good part of The Help was the Irvins and their housekeeper. They treated her like she was a member of the family. When she died, they made sure that her husband was taken care of. And when Senator Irvin died and was buried at the Presbyterian church there, she sat beside Ms. Irvin.
Wow.
And people want to condemn you for saying things like, oh, that's bigotry and all this and that. A person jumped on me the other day for something that just floored me. I referred to a friend of mine as a Southern gentleman. And that lady, with this political correctness stuff, said, that's a racist comment. I said, what are you talking about? I said, if someone relates to me, I'm paid a compliment. If I'm denoted as a Southern gentleman, you could pay me no higher tribute than that. The world's gone wacky.
Yeah.
Both parties are not fit to throw a bucket of spit at.
Yeah. It's such a different environment than what you came through and very valiantly fought for. I mean, it was, you know, it wasn't just civility, but you were basically making sure the Constitution remained intact.
Yeah.
And
I gave rulings all the time on a North Carolina Constitution, which made a big difference. I remember and living up to what I learned from Senator Irvin. One time, they had this young black man down in Smithfield, who kept taping over the sloganeering on the license tag that said "First and Freedom." He'd tape it over.
Yep.
And they arrested him 3 times for, quote, defacing the tag, a little statute there.
Yeah.
And I knew that there was something wrong with that.
Yeah.
The purpose of the tag is to identify the car. Totally, it's not although nothing wrong with sloganeering on it, it had nothing to do with the person's or law enforcement's ability to identify the vehicle and things that surround it. So I said, that won't stand. And I was asked to give a ruling on it from a DA in Johnston County. And I did a little research and wrote this good opinion saying that was his First Amendment freedom of speech and thought right to tape over First and Freedom if he didn't really believe it. And lo and behold, about John, a month later, the United States Supreme Court came down with a decision on point out of New Hampshire, which had a similar incident on their tag. It was live free or die. Well, this man didn't think it was appropriate, and they ruled. The Supreme Court ruled that was First Amendment right, and I felt so vindicated. Man, I said I'm making Senator Irvin proud right now.
Yes, sir, Rick. Yep.
Just the little things like that I remember.
Well, and you know, just your days as Attorney General, Secretary of State, working for Senator Irvin, there's a rich, cohesive fabric there that your life has, your public life has been, and that's why I so wanted to get you interviewed, because you know, no one can read tomorrow's newspaper.
No,
You
sir. No,
And
sir.
I look to the things that have happened. Now, one thing I have to laugh about when you were talking about the First in Freedom, after I graduated and I got married when I was 30 years old, so I waited a while.
Right.
So my wife and I, when we were dating, I said, let's audit a class over at Wake Forest. So she was originally from Ohio, so I said, let's do North Carolina history. So we took a North Carolina history course, and the part that I love and will never forget is Dr. Hendricks, and he was originally from South Carolina. And he always laughed because our very first slogan was "First in Flight."
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And
Yes.
he said, folks, I just want everybody in this room to know that the only contribution North Carolina made to flight was the wind and the sand. And he said, everything else were for those two boys from Ohio that came down here. And he goes, so I don't know that I would get too cocky about the new slogan.
Well, you can get either one now, by the way. I checked that out. You can get First in Flight or First in Freedom. Either way.
Well, let me ask you this. How would you wrap up how you feel about what you've done? I know we all have certain feelings about what we've done and we're proud of, but is there anything you would have changed in?
Well, when I was young and had all those positions, like Chief Counsel and Staff Director of the Senate Subcommittee at 27 years old, that's ridiculous, but I'd had all that training under Senator Irvin. Watergate being the Deputy Chief Counsel of the most famous hearings that have ever been held in the country. I was again 32 years old, and I've often thought that I should have read more. I should have read more. Now, I always loved to read, but I didn't read enough, and I wouldn't take back anything except some of the stupid things that I've done in my public life, but I owned up to them.
Yeah.
I owned up to them. And Secretary of State's office, I did some stupid things. I got a dose of high ego on steroids and did some stupid things and owned up to it and paid for it and decided not to run again the next time. I think the thing that mostly I would have done is kept in contact with some of my high school and college people more than I did now that they're so old. Like me, I'm 84, but
You look great.
I go to work every day.
Okay.
I work in the garden all the time. I have a weekend gardener show. It's WPTF on Don is one of the listeners. Don, our dear, wonderful friend.
Yeah.
Don
And
here.
we're here in Don Vaughn's study, which I appreciate Don making available for us. We're going to be covering. Don does he teaches over at the law school a North Carolina politics class. And Brian and I have gone over and filmed and put it on before. He did A Tale of Two Cities and had the mayor of Winston-Salem and the mayor of Greensboro together last year. This year he's doing A Tale of Three Cities, and he's doing High Point, Greensboro, and Winston-Salem, which cover all three of the
Interesting.
And so it's good. I told Don it makes for even better television because they can only be limited to so much time when there's three of them.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Well, I've been honored by Don to say that he'd like me to come on sometime and talk about Watergate, the legal implications, and why so many lawyers got messed up. Over 30 lawyers went to jail because they misapplied legal principles, which they should have known they couldn't do. And I think that'll make a good seminar. And you, let me say the thing though, that we've talked about a lot of things that I've done that were high profile, but the thing that I'm the most proud of, John, is something I formed 31 years ago called the Super Kids program. We take kids who never would have been able to go to college unless we gave them financial help. In the 31 years we've had the program, over 132 kids have gone to college.
Wow.
That would not be able to. We produced two lawyers, a physician, loads of teachers, and they're all giving back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I still have it going, and I want that to be my legacy, more than Watergate, more than Attorney General, any of those things, because I feel like I've been able to give back a lot.
Right.
And nobody in this world ever gets anywhere without the help from somebody else.
Yeah.
And I teach all these young people, thank the people who help you get where you are, then stop and thank them again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then show civility. That goes a long way. We don't have to live in a world today where everybody's at one another's throats. Of course we have differences. But if you can listen to somebody, you might learn something from them.
Yeah.
Families are broken up because of this fierce political debate we have today, and it's just very sad to me. And I think there's a way out of that. And I'm gonna try to find solace in my next book by using examples of some of these people that I've known in my life, including Bill Clinton. I interviewed Connie Chung the other day, one of my favorite people in Watergate, and of course Governor Martin. We were rivals. But we got along just like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And Jim Holshouse was another person too.
Well, and you know what I would love to see is that we could get together, and it may be something that would work for the State Capitol Foundation that I know you've been a part of for a long time, and it means a lot to you, that as a fundraiser to get you, Governor Martin, Governor Hunt, get people while we're still vibrant and alive to sit down and talk. And not just in a small way, but in a thoughtful way. And
if you can arrange that, that would be wonderful.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm on the board of the Lost Colony down in Manteo, and we are constantly looking for ways that we can raise money. And I, took it upon myself to try to get former Governor Easley to commit to come and join a group of former governors.
Correct.
And that's a tough nut to crack. Tried to get him to Blandwood. I want to thank you for all you've done, so unselfishly in serving, because, to serve in public office is not an easy thing. And you give up more than you actually get most of the time.
Well, I have a class you're familiar with. I teach each year. It's called the Institute of Political Leadership. It's been in business for about 40 years. They take about 20 to 25 bright young people, and Don went through it one time.
Right.
And they see people like me. They see people on the other spectrum. I don't know what spectrum I'm on. But the one thing that I teach them in that class is, if you don't like people, don't run for public office. If you got a thin skin, don't run for public office. Now, I would hate to think how I would fare these days, but I've often said to people, well, I'd probably do pretty well, because everything I did was always broadcast and put out on radio, TV, or newspaper, so I'm pretty clean, probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
And with a little maturity.
Yeah.
But I still have great faith in young people in this country, because that class I teach, and there's a young leadership thing I agreed to teach today too. And the main thing about getting in political life is, are you willing to take the slings and arrows of running and then get down to business, because it's harder to govern than to get elected.
Yeah.
A lot of people say, okay, I got elected. What do I do?
The hard part
The
starts.
hard part is helping govern.
Yeah.
And anybody that's run will tell you that.
Yeah.
And
I have to tell you a story of my own. You said when you talk to young people, I was 18 years old and worked for the then Speaker of the House, Carl Stewart, back in the 70s. And Carl was so good about showing me things that someone my age would never see. So one day he threw the keys at me and he said, I need you to drive me somewhere. Well, in those days, that could have meant we're going to Boone, we're going to Goldsboro, you know. And he said, no, we're just going around the corner. So we go around the corner to the governor's mansion, and it is a meeting with Governor Hunt, Lieutenant Governor Jimmy Green, Speaker of the House Carl Stewart, and Charles Winberry, who was the legislative liaison.
Oh, yeah.
You remember Big Charles.
Very well.
And when I say bigger than life, he really was bigger than life. So they sat in this room, and they sat around a round table, and I sat against the wall. And they spent an hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes, just discussing what can we do to lower infant mortality? What can we do to have cleaner water? What can we do to raise teacher salaries? So I thought that's the way it always worked. So I went and told that story about 5 years ago or so to Governor Hunt when he was in town. And he teared up and he said, John, it used to be.
Yes, it did. It did used to be. It did used to be.
But I thought that's what it was about, was making life better for all of the people, you know.
Well, some things do get done bipartisan nowadays, but the big things are just a clamor of noises, the Tower of Babel, with people at one another.
Yep.
And I think a good part of it is driven by the brand of political consultants we have today.
Oh, yeah.
Now, back in my day, I had a political consultant named Ray Strother. Ray never tried me to be something I wasn't. He said, you stay the country boy from Boone that grew up going to milking cows before school and plowing people's gardens after school. And he never tried to make me something I wasn't. And today, too, I heard a seminar yesterday about the two very prominent Republican and Democratic strategists, one for Cooper and one for Whatley. And they were talking about this was going to be probably, the Senate race would probably be the most expensive race in Senate history, upward $3 million, maybe $5 million. God, just think of how many hospitals you could build for that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I know consultants are a great deal of the problem today because they encourage people to engage in negative. Nobody likes negative campaigning, but you know what?
It works.
It works. And that is the troubling thing about it, that it works. I don't think a guy like me would make it today because I would refuse to do some of those things.
Yeah.
I don't think Sam Ervin would be in political life today if he were a younger guy. I don't think Jim Martin would be elected by his party.
No way.
I know I wouldn't be nominated for the Democratic Party either.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, I just want to thank you because you're one of the last of a very small group of people that have done many things that are great for this state and made North Carolina better. So I just want to thank you.
Thank you, John.
And you know how much I think of you. So
you're a great man.
Yeah. So thank you much, and we appreciate you coming on to Greensboro Community Television. Thanks.